Welcome back again to the Imaginary Gallery, and this is the discussion of the last video, which was from Sandra L. Brown's book, How to Spot a Dangerous Person. Remember, it was the parental seeker. And just like the last one, I didn't want to interject any types of personal information or take the subject off the subject, so I figured I'd go through the chapter and then reflect upon it separately, like I did on the last one, Klinger, I believe. So, the parental seeker. It's that cute person who acts childlike, but eventually you realize it's actually childishness. Which I've seen a few of these, not necessarily mine either, but others have found like the most darling looking person. However, the person's a parental seeker and like a dependent baby. So the person that would be dating such a creature would see it probably like a status symbol. Usually an older person with this young, hot thing. Well, some people are tempted to believe that even if they see the signs of the parental seeker, will be like, well, he or she is hot, and I'm older, so I've got what I want. I'm going to look good in public. But that is not very practical. It might be for a few weeks or a week or so, but in fact, I've had the experience of advising someone on such a thing on a few occasions, a few different someones, where I would tell them, it's like, well, that's a cute little kid maybe to play with or have fun with, but don't take that person on as like your partner or you'll be sorry. And of course, every time it turned out to be true, but nobody wants to listen to my advice, so I would give my input and then step back and figure, well, let nature do its thing. If it's meant to be, which it isn't, we'll see. And if it is, it's a surprise. We'll just let nature take its course, which it always does, and I'll just sit back and watch and try not to say I told you so later. But we go back to Sandra's parental seeker, which she calls Tommy Teenager. And I understand the appeal of the Tommy Teenager, especially if, like she mentions, if you've just been involved with like a really aggressive or assertive or mean person, maybe even a long-term relationship or a few short-term ones with several of them, aggressive, assertive types. But when you meet Tommy Teenager, it's like a little kid. And you think, what a breath of fresh air. There's no way this little kid could ever cause the problems that last one did. And you automatically feel safe and sometimes like you're in control of the situation because you think there's no way this kid could stand on its own. This kid's looking to me for advice and for help. And so it puts you in a position where you, especially if you're a caring or nurturing person, you'll be thinking, oh, this poor person needs help. I'll be there for. And of course, when they give their tales of how everybody else treated them so terribly, if you are one of the types that seeks to help others or fix others, chances are you'll see this wonderful divine person that you had such a great night with, and then find out that his or her ex, whatever, was so abusive. And you'll see the shyness and the childlike behavior and think, that poor kid, whoever that ex was, ruined him or her. Oh, and then you start to like cling to the parental seeker, not knowing that's what it is. And that, a lot of times, which I've mentioned, the parental seeker doesn't necessarily, which I don't think Sandra talks about, but as I've mentioned before, a lot of these 8 dangerous types, as she said, well, she did say they could be a blending together in the same person, but I also took it a step further to say that I have witnessed basically a very evil, vindictive, entitled, psychopathic trait person who has assumed a few of these roles before that reality came out. So sometimes these cluster B people will actually try on, like I mentioned before, the masks. Well, they might try on the parental seeker mask, but then you'll be surprised a few months later to see them put on a different mask, which is basically a polar opposite of the parental seeker. So you have to be careful as well. So I'm assuming that Sandra just means that the parental seeker, whether it's real or whether it's an act it's assuming, is dangerous, and she is right. Because, like Sandra says, it's like having a toddler down around your knees all day, and you might think, oh, that would be fun for a few hours, but this child has nothing else going on in its life, and you may have things going on in your life, so you're like thinking, okay, well, today's the day I need to take care of it. Oh, I'll do it with you. Oh, can I go with you? And then if you say no, what? They act all sad and pout like a child, and you may feel sorry and think, oh, he or she's been through so much. Okay, come on. And then you like adapt, and you step over your own boundaries in many cases with these types. But these people know what they're doing, and their constant loyalty, as she mentions, can be a breath of fresh air, especially if you're used to having somebody who's basically ignoring you or not appreciating your talents and abilities. Then you find Tommy Teenager who just loves everything about you. It can be tempting to believe it. But you'll eventually learn, which is usually not apparent at first, like she says, that they never really developed an adult personality. They're stuck in a childhood phase. And as she mentions, usually it's related to childhood something, which it seems a lot of problems with people are related to childhood. And in the movies as well, you see the murderous person who, they go to the backstory, it was beaten up as a kid, or it was murdered as a kid and came back to life or something. But yes, childhood is very important. The big deal, though, that Sandra is talking about with these types is they're not like a child who's developing and deciding which way to go. These are people who have done all that, and they've ended up the way they are. So they may try to disguise it or hide it, but it always comes out that these people never really developed an adult sense of self, an adult sense of reality, or interpersonal relationships, because a lot of them just were never allowed to realize or come in to know who they really are as a person. They spend their time trying to gain the approval of their target while acting childlike and innocent and hoping that you will feel sorry for them or pity or will nurture them because it's something within you that you think you can make a difference with this person. You will never treat him like the last lady did, or her like the last man, or whoever. But the other thing is, which I've noticed with some of these, is they're looking for that eternally absent parent, which they're not going to say this to you, but you can just tell. And They may tell you stories of childhood, which may lead you to think that maybe it's a parental seeker, but a word of advice: it wouldn't be a good idea to read this chapter to this person and then say, "Are you a parental seeker? Did your parents do this to you or that to you when you were young?" Because a lot of them, I've learned, they won't admit to it, especially if you even act like you're concerned, like genuinely saying, "Hey, did this happen to you? Did you feel inadequate because of this or that?" No, they'll probably say no. "Oh, no, it was no problem." However, their other behaviors and antics indicate otherwise in many cases. But yes, they do act like 10-year-olds and sometimes. And a lot of times the childlike behavior is hidden from like other people. So like if you bring this person to your parents' house or your friend's house, they're liable to act normal in front of everyone. But it can be annoying to deal with. It also can be kind of flattering too to think that you found such a thing, but and we'll move on. Now it says that he wants to be waited on to have these needs met. I haven't necessarily encountered that part of this, but I do understand the part about trying to fill the hole in the soul that was left by neglect from childhood. And when you take care of this person, he or she may say he or she feels good, which, if we transfer that over to the cluster B, would be equivalent to you're giving this person supply. And as far as the adult chores, and I've seen that before. I lived with that, where there were two of us, and we adopted these dogs, and I would be the one to clip their nails, the one to brush their teeth, and the other person would give in to the dog's manipulations, because, face it, if your dog's claws are long, they have to be clipped. It's just a fact. Otherwise, they curl under and grow inside their paw, and it's sick. So I would be the one to take out the clippers, take the dog, and of course, probably from a memory, there had been times where I accidentally clipped too short. So the dog remembers. They're intelligent. So there would be times when I would like move the clipper right towards the nail before I'd even touch it. The dog would yelp and cry. Well, the parental seeker person would hear that and say, "Oh no, don't do that. He doesn't like it." It's like, don't you give in to the dog's manipulation. It's like, if it was up to you, the dog's nails would never get cut. But they like to have the dog to hold and play with, but as far as taking care of it, that's a different story. Or with their nails or their teeth. When I would brush the teeth, one of them would like battle and fight and cry and make noises, and I'd hear, "Stop it, he doesn't like that." And I'd be like, his teeth are rotten and they need to be brushed. So I kind of felt like an adult in that situation, which I never even thought of that until just now. But, and an interesting story for an ADHD moment relating to this topic was the same person that was there to give for the dogs would do like a lot of cluster bees do, which is when you first meet them, they bend to your every wish, to your every will, and then once they're settled in, all of a sudden they change. It's like they got you, you're in there in the house with them, and now they're going to be lazy. Well, that's kind of what happened with this dog thing after just a few years of having these dogs, because it used to be the habit for us to wake up, put the dogs, as we call it, their clothes on, which would be their harnesses, and get their retractable leashes, take them sometimes on a 3-mile walk. Well, after a little while, this person got settled in, and I would think, okay, it's time for a dog walk. And in fact, we couldn't even say the word walk around the dogs because if they hear that word, their ears would go up, they'd start barking and dancing around because they're smart, they're intelligent. So we'd have to say, we should take, and even if I said take them, their heads would turn and their heads would tilt. So it's like, we want to WAL, whatever, but after that got old, I guess, for the parental seeker, it would be, I would think it's time to do it. So I would tell the other person, and in fact, it would usually be the scam type where, like, the night before, it would be, I think tomorrow afternoon we should take them for a you know what, and it would be okay. Well, then tomorrow comes, and of course, it only said okay just to get through the evening, because if it said no, then I'd be like, come on, yes, come on, come on, come on. So it knows it's manipulation to agree to it for the moment to get through the night. And then the next day, oh, I'm too tired. I don't want to. And I'd say, we already agreed. Now come on. So I learned a trick, which is kind of a counter manipulation, somewhat. But I thought it was cute. But the little boy dog, he was very, well, they're both very intelligent, but I was able to manipulate the dog to manipulate the other person. So what I would do would be, the dog would be upstairs and the lazy child would be downstairs in front of the TV on a couch. So I would go up the steps when the boy dog was there, and I'd say to him, I'd whisper, go tell Daddy you want to go for a walk. And the dog's face, his eyes would go open, his ears would tilt, and his head would tilt, and he'd like, he'd zoom down the steps. He'd jump right on the lap of the other person and start barking at him. Like he's saying, take me for a walk, take me for a walk. Other times I'd be in the room nearby and I'd be like whispering, go tell, and he would say, don't you do that, because what would end up happening usually would be this darling little dog would run down there, especially after I've asked him and he said he's too tired. Well, the dog will ask for himself, would jump on his lap and start the barking, and I would say to him, trying to appeal to a sense of empathy, which may or may not have been real, but the dog sitting there staring him in the face, like talking to him, and I'd say, come on now, you're going to turn down that face? You're going to turn him down for what he's asking you for? And usually it would end with, okay, just a short one. And he would be all mad. I thought, but that's what you have to do with your children. You have to keep taking care of them. Don't get bored with them. Anyway, back to the story. And they do have a fear of abandonment, which, as she mentions, does cause them to move quickly from relationship to relationship. And I've met a few of those too, where it's like they cannot stand to be on their own. It's like they just can't do it. I'm picturing them in their house alone with the four walls around them, closing in on them, reminding them of how horrible they are, I guess. At least that's what they think. And so they've got to have someone there. And a lot of times, like with Cluster B, they'll say what they need to say to make that someone think it's special, and then when it's gone, they find another person to do the same thing with. But I can understand where the partner of such a monster may go above and beyond to keep this person happy, and it still is never enough. And yes, I thought it was interesting when she had mentioned to check out their past history, which, when you're dealing with, though, the disordered cluster B types, though, a lot of times I've learned you're not going to get the real story. No, you're going to get a twisted version of the story, because it's probably the same story that plays out over and over and has throughout history, and by now the person's realized if they tell someone new what happened in the last one, it doesn't work, because they're like, oh, I can see how that, you were clinging too much to him or her, and that's why it left. Oh, they won't dare tell you that. So they're going to rewrite their history. So even if you ask, I guess that's the point, is to ask, and like she says, listen to the responses. Kind of like if you meet a person who, right off the bat, wants to marry you. And when you have your course of conversations, you learn that this person was either married or engaged like 10 times previously. Well, that's kind of a clue. And again, you have to just take that in, and you can ask, well, wow, 10 different engagements and marriages, what happened? And you'll be likely to get a cluster B response, which is, oh, well, they all were liars. They all were cheaters. Oh, they all were evil. Which common sense will tell you, what's the common denominator with all 10 of them? Him or her. So it's very unlikely that that many people would turn out to be so terrible to cause the engagement or marriage to end. You're dealing with a monster more than likely, and you may say that, and it's not a good idea because you'll just be given defensiveness like, how could you dare take their side? Because it speaks for itself. But that's a different topic. But yes, I thought that was a good advice for anybody, no matter what kind of creature you find yourself dealing with or that you think you might be dealing with. And yes, I've seen the parental seekers as well, which you sometimes can tell. Like if you meet someone new and throughout their conversation they happen to reveal that the last place they lived rent-free and only paid for utilities. And then I had a few that would be like, oh, if you let me live with you, I'll fix up your house if you let me live with you rent-free. And I figured that's what this person is looking for, is someone to take it in and let it live rent-free. And I thought, oh, no way. I knew better than that, but they think they can win you over with their flattery, but it's like, huh, you still need to have a job and help contribute. I'm not your parent. But I thought it was interesting where she mentions, listen carefully for excuses for things, like, how long have you ever kept a job? Oh, 2 weeks is the longest. Like, well, what's the matter? Well, you know it's probably going to be a lie that you hear, but still, listen. Oh, the bosses never liked me. They were always too rude, or something that's external, which will give you a clue you're dealing with some kind of creature, monster. If they've ruined the credit they had, oh, it's not my fault. It's because of I was helping someone else. I was so caring I didn't pay my own bills. Lies. But, and she also, I thought it was interesting how she says not to discount what others tell you, even though it doesn't usually do any good, especially if this person's love bombing you, which is kind of tying in a narcissist with it, but it very well could be the same kind of person. But more than likely, it's going to be one of the manipulators who will try to triangulate or to keep you away from anyone who knows its history, because you risk finding out. And things you know already will fall in place with the other person's testimony. So a lot of times they'll tell you lies about the other person just so you won't want to confront them and talk to them. But Sandra suggests you do find out what happened with the old ones, and to listen to what you hear. Especially if this person has an excuse for everything, chances are it's a big old con artist. And as far as the number of relationships, I think we already covered that. Oh, I want to marry you. I know you're the one after a week. Wouldn't I be number 11? Oh, yes, but the others, they were all terrible. You're the one. But, well, I'm sure the other 10 were the one, too, at one moment, at one point or another. So you can't really talk logic or adult-like to these types, because they'll just tell you that it was the other people's fault and you're being mean. Then they'll pout and expect you to pick up the pieces and say, oh, I didn't mean that, which is, I never did, but but they seem to want that. But yes, it's good to find out how they function, because a lot of them, these parental seekers as well, they don't seem to have any other life when I meet them, and I would ask them, like, you want to be here every day and night. What if we didn't meet? Where would you be right now? Which answer is probably chasing after a few others at the same time. And since we're getting to the end of it, I agree with, she says, these seekers grew up without any discipline, which does cause problems for them in adult life, because they went through their childhood with probably nobody home watching them. They came and went as they pleased. Nobody enforced any kind of boundary or limits. They didn't get much guidance, so it's kind of like you're filling that in for them, because when they were a child they didn't get any, so now here they are, all misdeveloped or underdeveloped, and then you're supposed to pick up the pieces, and good luck. And I thought it was interesting how she says that she says normal people resist being fixed, but yet these people want to be fixed. For some reason cannot see itself as an adult, a parent, or a provider, because it has no models for these roles. Didn't have anyone to model itself after. So her last part here is, again, if he's not shutting down, or she, in the face of someone else's attempt to change or fix him or her, that should be a red flag for you. Flying high, she says, because that's, again, codependency, which is a whole different subject. And then if you order her book for $1 used on Amazon, you can read some of her stories she has, of like actual stories. And I believe that wraps this one up for discussion. I hope it wasn't too long, but I just don't want to interject in between the book passages with my own 2 cents. So, PEACE.
I still haven't found Donald Marshall. I've been looking for him ever since that first evening we spent in the cloning center. But I'm so proud to know now that so many celebrities that I thought were deceased are actually alive and well, and perverted as hell, and I love it. I am the new narcopath. I'm even better than the other one. I'm transhuman. I'm transgendered. And I'm a lesbian, a man, and a woman.
Don't worry about her. She malfunctioned. I'm her replacement.